it's so hard for me to find someone who has this disease so that I can discuss things with them.
How has this disease actually impacted your daily life? You when it started, you were going to school, now you're working, your hobbies, you seem to be a very active person.
With this condition, globally, there's an 8 to 10 years delay in the diagnosis. I was actually very thankful when I first got introduced to the Axios team, because honestly saying this, for the first time during my disease journey, I honestly felt like there's someone who knows and who cares to answer my doubts.
Hello and welcome to Speaking Of, a podcast brought to you by Axios International. I'm your host, Asma Ali Zain, and in this podcast, we give voice to those whose stories often go unheard. We provide a platform for patients to share their insights, perspectives, and journeys with others facing similar struggles. These are stories of hope, stories of support, and stories of healing. These are your stories. At 18, youngsters are full of energy and passion, with eyes full of stars for the future. At this age, many people are finishing up high school and preparing to move on to college or the workforce, which is an exciting time full of possibilities and new experiences. But what if they're suddenly struck with a devastating lifelong condition? What happens then? How do they cope? Something similar happened to a youngster whom we will call Maya to protect her privacy. One day, Maya was a happy-go-lucky teenager, and the next, she discovered that she had a condition that she had never ever heard of before, and that threatened to restrict her movement physically. 9 years ago, Maya was diagnosed with Ankylosing Spondylitis, also known as AS. AS is a type of arthritis that causes inflammation in the joints and ligaments of the spine. Sometimes, the inflammation is so severe that the spine becomes as stiff as a bamboo stick. This is an excruciating condition that over time can make movement very difficult. In today's podcast, Maya shares her journey with AS, the challenge along the way, and the long road ahead. Welcome to Speaking Of, Maya. How are you doing today?
Hello dear, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Not real bad. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Maya. I just have lots of questions for you, and as I was saying, you were very young, when probably you never heard of AS, and you were certainly struck with this condition. So can you tell us a little about your experience with ankylosing spondylitis, including when you first started and how your diagnosis came about?
Thank you very much. I first want to thank you for giving me this opportunity and for having me today. I also want to add that this is the first time I actually talk publicly about my condition and my journey with this disease. You were asking me when I was showing symptoms. I first started showing symptoms when I was 15. And usually with this condition, the first symptom is lower back pain. Mm-hmm. That does not go away at that age. And even when I used to speak up about it, everyone around me was like, you're still very young. You're not supposed to have these pains. And no one really actually addressed or accepted or even understood that I had a pain like that. Mm-hmm. At 15, back pain at that age, no one used to understand or even address or accept that I had a pain like that. Or give it, let's say, attention or importance. Because at a young age like that, no one expects a serious condition. And then fast forward to the diagnosis, which I consider myself very lucky to have gotten my diagnosis at the age of 18, like only 3 years after I showed my symptoms. Because with this condition, globally, there's an 8 to 10 years delay in the diagnosis.
Oh my God.
Because of the masking other symptoms. Mm-hmm. Yes. And also one of the main factors that affect the prognosis of the disease is the early diagnosis. Mm-hmm. Because the earlier you diagnose, the easier it's treated. And when disease progresses, some stuff stops working and you should, go to the next step.
Mm-hmm. So it just started off with very severe pain, is it?
Yes, it's a severe pain that actually affects the quality of life, especially in the early mornings, like once you wake up. And me as a child and now as an adult, I'm always moving. I'm always like exercising or, I'm not from those kind of people that was always laying in bed. So this was really hard for me to accept because once the symptoms starts to show, and especially during the flare-ups of the disease, the flare-ups of the disease is in which the pain is more than usual, the stiffness is a lot more than usual, and it could even come with fever. So at the times of flare-ups, sometimes even getting out of bed was really hard. So that was really hard to accept in the beginning, because the pain sometimes goes when you take the painkiller or is less severe. But actually it's the fatigue that affects the quality of life and affects the daily activities.
Right. So you were telling me you were 15 and you are lucky because you got diagnosed really early. So how actually did it happen? You are based in a country where healthcare might not be, that advanced. So how did it all happen and how was your condition discovered?
Actually, thank you very much for addressing that problem, because in this country, honestly, yes, the healthcare is unfortunately not at its best quality. I did a couple of blood tests at that age because I felt some symptoms that were unexplained at that age. And by the way, this was all my battle. I never told anyone about it, even at that age. And then I remember when I was 18, I traveled to a nearby country, to Turkey, actually it was. I just wanted to make sure about a couple of other conditions that I had. And it was discovered by, let's say, a coincidence, actually. My GP saw me and I had other unexplained symptoms because, as I mentioned earlier, that this disease is a systemic disease. So aside from the back and joint pain, you could also have other signs and symptoms. For example, gastrointestinal problems, even problems with the heart and the breathing, heartbeat, because there's systemic inflammation. So basically all the body is. So the GP actually, after I explained this, he was like, this is not having this much symptoms, it's not normal. You have a systemic condition. And then I went through the whole journey of the MRIs and the blood tests. And there's also one more challenge about the diagnosis of this disease, is that it's considered seronegative. Seronegative is that your blood tests will usually come back normal. So doctors usually depend on the physical exam in the doctor's office, your blood work, and also the images and the MRIs to UCLA, because the diagnosis depends a lot on more than one factor. Other than one blood test that comes positive and that's it, you have this condition.
So the doctors really have to narrow down and rule out many other conditions and then maybe narrow down that this is actually. So is this condition somewhere in your family or what do the doctors say? How does it suddenly come about?
Yes, this condition is actually genetic, let's say, or you are more likely to get this condition if one person in your family has it.
Okay.
But surprisingly, I don't have anyone in the family that has it. So it could be like a gene mutation. Or in another theory, it could be older generations that never discovered earlier. As I said, like great-grandparents or even older than that. But as my family, now I'm the only person who has the condition and the gene. There's this gene, HLA-B27. So the people who have this gene positive have one of 4 conditions, or even 4 of them, are Ankylosing Spondylitis, psoriatic arthritis, ulcerative colitis.
So you were telling me, Maya, you were really young when it happened, 15, and you're still very young, some 20-something. That's an age when every human being is really very active. So how has this disease actually impacted your daily life? you when it started, you were going to school, now you're working, your hobbies, you seem to be a very active person, you told me. You love to do exercise probably, and relationships. So this kind of limits you. I'll come to how you deal with it daily, but just to know like how it has impacted your daily life.
Thank you for bringing up this point, because it actually has affected my daily routines and daily life a lot, like any other chronic condition would do. For example, as you were sitting when I was in college, it was really hard to stay in class for like 2 hours without moving, because this condition, the more you stay inactive, the more the stiffness and the pain increases. So it was really hard in college. It was really hard actually while I'm working, and thankfully now with the right treatment, I'm able to live as normal as possible. And regarding my hobbies, actually my hobbies all include like exercise and swimming, walking, which benefit this disease. Well, that's great, but also it is really challenging at the times of the flare-ups. At times of the flare-ups, you're just thankful you're alive and breathing. That's it.
So now I understand probably, your hobbies are built around your condition. You kind of, from what we are talking about, is that you incorporated them. You love swimming, it will keep you active, and it will keep your condition also like, at bay, to say. But for example, you didn't have this condition. Did you think about doing something else in life? Maybe something, different from what you are doing right now?
Actually, no, I did not really let this, let's say, affect my life.
Yeah, I can see.
For example, I studied abroad, which was even further. Having a chronic condition and living on your own is hard during college. But I really did not let stand in the way of who I want to be as a person, because this was not easy, honestly, because it came after years of trying to accept this situation. And actually, the hardest part of having a chronic disease is accepting that you have a chronic disease, because everything other than this will come after you accept it. Like, you will know what's for you and what you can't. You can't do anymore, and how you can't live anymore. All comes after accepting that you are gonna have this for the rest of your life. And one more thing, I also I went to therapy for this, which I really advise everyone with a chronic condition, especially at this age, to do. There was one thing my therapist once told me: do what you are doing for yourself, for how I wanted my life to be before I found out about this condition. Of course, I'm not saying that you should not listen to your body and ignore the symptoms and not get the right treatment and push yourself. But also, there is a balance there where you should be taking care of yourself, but also not letting it take over your life.
I guess that's a very great advice that come from your therapist. And since we are talking about symptoms, so how do you manage your symptoms daily? And especially when there is a flare up, like you say, those are the most difficult times. Are there any kind of strategies that you have found that are effective and that can help you, get through your the most difficult time?
Actually, yes. For example, for the back pain, during flare-ups, or even on days, for example, that I have that I'm more tired than other days, heating pads, and this is actually scientifically proven, that are as effective as painkillers for the back pain. And some people, of course, benefit from cold compresses, let's say, but the heating pads is the more common thing.
Okay.
And usually during flare-ups, what's advised is to rest, because your body is internally having a battle, so you should not push it. Yeah, even if there is work, I could skip going to work at that day, because if you push it during the flare-ups could last longer.
Okay.
So the main and most important thing to do is to rest.
So, and that's what you do.
Go on its own for like. Exactly.
Okay, that's what you
I
found.
do.
Yeah.
And of course, I have access to my medications and painkillers as needed. But the rest of the heating pads are like work like limited.
Right. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Axios team. You have been working with them very closely. So tell me how the team from Axios has helped in your entire journey. Did they guide you? Did they answer all the questions you had? And, did they help you throughout your all the issues? Can you just take me through how the dealing was with and what kind of help you received from the team?
I was actually very thankful when I first got introduced to the Axios team, because honestly saying this, for the first time during my disease journey, I honestly felt like there's someone who knows and who cares to answer my doubts and even understands that, for example, I have a chronic condition. Because as you know, that this condition affects like 1% of the population. It's a very rare condition. It's so hard for me to find someone who has this disease so that I can discuss things with them, let's say, and understand me. But I honestly found this with the Axios team. And even the most important part about when I got first introduced to the Axios team was the awareness that they could give to my family.
That's
because honestly, until I was introduced to the Axios team, I didn't know how to put my family in the picture with me in this disease. I honestly couldn't speak their language. I didn't know how to, explain it to them. What should they be expecting? What can they do for help? But I still remember the first time my father, that was actually the first time that I didn't have an idea what I was going through and what was this condition and how serious it was, because they really helped me.
No, I'm so happy to hear that the Axios team went beyond the patient and connected with the families as well. I guess, as we were talking about earlier, it impacts the relationships as well. So it's important that everyone around you, your friends, your family, your close ones, your loved ones, are all involved in this journey with you, and they understand. And I'm very happy to know and glad to know that the Axios team helped you connect and presented a different perspective, probably, and helped your family understand what you were going through. So you already mentioned some about the treatments and therapies and medications that you are finding helpful. But tell me, with this kind of issue that you are having, the condition that you have, your perspectives on healthcare, chronic illness, and, disability might have changed. So what's your experience been? And, when we give advice to other patients with chronic conditions, so it might have shaped your perspective. How has that happened?
I'm going to be speaking actually about the healthcare system of the country that I live in. And especially with people with chronic conditions and disabilities. After having this condition, I started noticing, for example, the parking spots for disabled people. I started noticing how, for example, there's nothing that makes their lives easier in here, especially in this country. And because any other country that you go to, for example, there's in the emergency room, for example, they're going into the emergency room. There has to be a place where a patient with a wheelchair can easily access to. I started noticing these things a lot, and I actually started being thankful about the gifts that we have. For example, even the gift of eyesight that we might not value every day.
True.
Is a really huge gift and even simpler than that, being able to bend the finger without feeling pain in it is a huge gift that we don't feel every day.
True.
And a tiny pain in one spot in your body can affect your whole day and affect your whole belief system and your whole perspective on life. So I think that this condition and being aware and having chronic disease really did highlight these things for me. I don't think I would ever have had this awareness if it was not for this condition.
Right, you're very right in saying that we do not appreciate that good health is wealth. So just as we wind down towards the end of our podcast and this interesting discussion that we are having, Maya, would you like to give any kind of advice to the youngsters there, especially to other people who have misconceptions or they stereotype about AS or chronic illness in general? So is there any message you'd like to share with the listeners about living with your experience living with a chronic condition?
For the patients and for the people who are living and going through a journey like this or similar to this, or going through any journey about a chronic condition, I would really want them to focus on the acceptance part. As I mentioned earlier in the interview, that accepting this is accepting that you are going to have a life after this. And that this is not the end of the world. And one more stereotype about people with chronic condition that I have experienced myself is that some people, unfortunately, view it as a flaw.
Correct.
Like you're flawed because you have a chronic condition. And sometimes I joke about it with my friends. I tell them I am doing everything that you do, but I have a little pain with it. So having a chronic condition does not make you any less of a person. Having a chronic condition should not one thing to do what you want and for living the life that you want. Yes, you have to be cautious. You have to love yourself and accept yourself, but also live your life.
So in your case, actually, just to come back a little bit to that, in your case, your movement hasn't been restricted that much with the condition, right?
Yes, thankfully, because I was diagnosed in an early age and I was in an early stage of the disease. I can say that I'm maintaining my activity until now. Also, you should keep exercising to maintain flexibility. So at times that I stop exercising, I feel a bit more stiff. But once I start exercising again, everything goes back to normal again.
Right. So lastly, looking to the future, what are your hopes and goals for managing your condition and then living a life that is fulfilling? Is there any focus you have? Or I can understand within our brief conversation that you have, you're a very positive person. You're a very brave person. You have learned how to actually, build your life around the condition. But again, looking to the future, are there any hopes and goals? How you will manage this?
Thank you very much. I do actually, and I'm at the stage where I can joke about this. So I always say this, that my goal is to maintain flexibility as long as I can. Because you know that this condition eventually, usually patients, especially those who have not had access to the right treatment, end up on a wheelchair. So honestly, my goal is to delay that as much as I can and be able to enjoy my life as much as I can and see what I want to see, like travel as much as I can until I can.
Right.
And also the most important part is that to maintain this positive outlook and the acceptance that I have for this condition now, because honestly, we don't know what will happen in the future. And sometimes you can change your mind about things. So my main goal is to maintain this mindset and maintain my well-being for as long as I can.
I think that's most important, and we wish you really all the best in your future life, and we hope that you will keep this positive outlook and give hope to others as well, to people who are listening. Thank you very much for joining us today, Maya. Your story is very inspiring and interesting. I'm sure the listeners are going to learn a lot from this. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode where we have spoken with an inspiring young patient living with the condition that has drastically changed her life. We hope that listening to her journey has shed light on the challenges faced by people with chronic illnesses and the resilience and strength that can come from living with these kind of conditions. As an access to healthcare company, Axios International provides complete support that a patient would need at any point in their journey. We also want to encourage listeners to continue seeking out stories and perspectives from those with chronic illnesses. Only through empathy and understanding can we truly support and uplift one another. Tune in again for another inspiring patient journey brought to you only by Axios International.
Axios, transforming access to healthcare.